Everything's on fire. Everything's on fire. Everything's on fire.
Welcome back to another episode of the IDP Heat Seekers presented by RotoHeat.com, the only fantasy show that is going to acknowledge Al Bubba Baker's 23 sacks in a single season record that is newly found. Strahan ain't got nothing on a former Detroit Lion. With that being said, we got a fun one this evening. We've got some quality conversations to be had because training camp is around the corner. For those of you that are Steelers and Cowboys fans, your guys open in 2 days. With that being said, we've got a technical difficulties filled evening of fun with my man Kraig Reith. If you can hear me, Kraig, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you?
There it is. I like it. You know what? I cannot complain. The world's still moving. Things are still happening. People are still living the dream, and I'm one of those people. It's going to be a fun week for us this week, probably more so for you than the rest of us, but it'll be a fun week, and we're going to start it off on a good note. So we got lots of news and notes tonight. We've got plenty of conversations to be had about the things we're looking forward to as we get to training camp. So tonight's show is going to look a little different than typical IDP shows. Normally we just hammer you with amazing IDP content and blow your minds. Tonight we're going to get you ready for training camp. We're going to talk about some things that we're excited about. We're going to talk about some things that maybe we're interested to see what happens. But first we're going to start with news and notes. The biggest piece of news and notes is, I guess it's all perspective. Melvin Ingram signed with the Pittsburgh Steelers on a 1-year deal. Kraig, how do you feel about that, lining him up across from T.J. Watt? What's that do for you? And I saw some people already saying they were sad they just dropped him recently. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, to that effect, I had a buddy who was asking me for advice in our home league about who to drop as he was picking someone up. And his team was sort of like one of those in-between teams, and he ended up dropping Melvin Ingram. I'm still of the opinion that I'm not sure what he has left. I think he's 32 or going to be 33 this season. He's been a fine IDP player up until last year, really. I mean, the year before, he still had a really nice season. But we're going to have to see if it's an aberration. I don't think with the contract that he got, clearly he had a ton of suitors. And I'm also not completely sure that they view him as a consistent piece out there. He may just be a situational pass rusher because they do have Highsmith that they drafted in 2020 in the 3rd round there. So we'll have to see what happens. I'm not going out trying to get him anywhere if I don't have him. But it's definitely one of those situations to see how it plays out. And honestly, it probably will play out more so at the start of the season than training camp, because I don't think there's going to be a lot veteran that you know what you're getting. He's probably going to be more seeing playing time at the start of the season. What do you think?
Yeah, it'll be interesting, mostly because he didn't get a lot of playing time. I think he get injured, and he had like 7 games of action last year. And in those games, trying to think if he even registered a sack. I mean, he just looked – the little bit of game time he had last year, he just didn't produce a whole lot, which is why the Chargers most likely moved on from him, because he's getting up there in age. I think he is actually 30 – yeah, he is 32 already. But here in Pittsburgh, I don't know that they're going to need him to be much more than using his intelligence and his pass rushing ability to get after guys. So, yes, that does limit what they do with him. Highsmith is still a young guy. This is only his 2nd year in the league. Especially with a 3rd round pick, he could develop quickly. They probably drafted him thinking more of the long-term game. So in my mind, Ingram has an opportunity to get a fairly significant workload, but at his age and with the injuries that he's had recently, because I don't think he's had a full 16 games in 2 years at least. So I can't imagine them keeping him long term as a full-time player. I'm sure Highsmith gets heavily involved as well. They really start to split that difference. But remember they added Quincy Roche in the draft this year. And it'll be interesting to see how they rotate these guys, because especially in the division they're in, they're going to be having to rotate these guys in and out because there's a lot of running they're going to be doing, chasing after all these mobile quarterbacks they're facing. Okay, so what else we got? So we got Jarrell Casey. Go ahead.
Possible with that cheap. Yeah,
there you are.
It's not keeping me up to date here. I don't know if it's the video or not. If I'm, I was just gonna say you could see him potentially being someone that gets shipped out. If things start going poorly for him too, where they're just not going to compete at all with a cheap enough contract that they could get something for him on a 1-year deal too. So
certainly, you're absolutely right. It really does depend. So next up on the news and notes front, Jarrell Casey is still in the conversation. He's had multiple teams contact him recently. With some of these veterans that are still out there on the market, as we get into training camps and as guys get injured, you're really going to start to see some of these guys get offers, because think about it. I mean, there's Steven Nelson, who's still out there, a cornerback who played in Pittsburgh last year. You've got Brian Poole and Richard Sherman. Obviously, we don't know exactly what kind of issues he's going to have from the league. Justin Houston, KJ Wright, Olivier Vernon. There's a lot of IDP guys, IDP depth type players that you're going to see. And Jarrell Casey is a guy who's had production, who's been able to do it. And these teams that are in need of defensive end or defensive line help, depending on the type of scheme they're running, Jarrell Casey is going to be a name that people are going to look at. He brings production. He brings a solid background. He's produced in many situations. So I think it'll be interesting to see what teams are looking at with him and what they're looking to do with him. At his age, Jarrell Casey is a guy that is going to, very similarly to Melvin Ingram, Jarrell Casey is going to be a guy that needs probably a snap count. He's 31 or 32 as well as Ingram. He was hurt last year, just like Ingram. So a lot of the guys that we still see in free agency that are waiting for jobs are guys that either were hurt last year or underperformed and are getting up there in age. Kraig, what's your thoughts on a guy like Jarrell Casey? Do you think he lands a job where, as an interior IDP asset, that he gives you any type of relevancy? My guess here is that Kraig is still having trouble hearing me, and that's okay. We will keep going. And I will say that I don't see Jarrell Casey as a guy that's going to get a lot of IDP relevancy for a team. At 31, he's going to come in and be kind of a leader, going to be a guy that mentors young guys, but I just don't see Jarrell Casey being a guy that's going to give you any IDP fantasy relevance. Much like the rest of this kind of top 100 free agents available. Most of the sites you go to, NFL Trade Room or some of these sites publish top 100 articles. And when you look through it, a lot of the guys are veterans who have had success in the league, been on successful teams, been IDP relevant, but unfortunately, at this point in their career, they're guys that are going to rotate in, they're going to get involved in different areas. Even a guy like Jeff Heath, who's kind of bounced around but been a starter. He was a starter in Dallas. Vegas brought him in last year and had some success. All these guys are guys that aren't really going to be insanely IDP relevant for you. So as we keep trying to get Kraig on the show, I do apologize that we're losing our other man, Kraig, here. He's having some technical difficulties, and that's okay. We'll keep moving on. Saints defensive lineman David Onyemata was suspended 6 games for testing positive for a banned substance. So, again, not a guy who's insanely IDP relevant, but a name to keep an eye on as that defense is transitioning. They with Davison leaving in free agency for Cincy, they've got some guys that could become fantasy relevant or at least get fantasy relevant playing time. Onyemata would have been one of those guys, but he's at least going to be out for 6 weeks. Buffalo News believes Mario Addison's roster spot could be in jeopardy. With what they've done recently in terms of draft capital spent on players, Buffalo's got a defense that is quickly getting a youth infusion. They added Gregory Rousseau, and then last year they added AJ Epinesa in the second round. They've got Carlos Basham. Buffalo is a team that's quickly adding in youth into this defensive line. So Mario Addison is a guy who's aging out and who, though he was a starter, could potentially be losing playing time. Welcome back, Kraig. Hopefully everything's ship-shape for you. But, I was talking about Buffalo and their defensive line situation where Mario Addison's potentially in the outs. What do you make of something like that, if that's even a real thing? Do you think any of the young guys, Epinesa, Rousseau,
we'll
Basham,
see if it works.
Yeah, you're not so sure that happens yet, eh?
No, I'm not sure that my stuff is going to be working here fully. But defensive line in Buffalo will be greatly improved. I'm not sure that they're going to cut him because he is nice veteran leadership to have. That we'll see. If it is, it's more of just a money saving, trying to get the young guys more playing time sort of thing.
Yeah, it's interesting. Because that defensive line, there's plenty of fantasy relevance to go around in that defensive line. Obviously, Jerry Hughes and Addison are both aging veterans, but both were very consistent and were able to at least give you something last year. But they've added, 3 young guys in the draft in the last 2 years that, depending on their development, could quickly ascend into starting type roles. But with the contracts, Hughes and Addison, it wouldn't surprise me that they keep them as veterans to help lead these young guys.
Yeah, I think they stay there for another year, personally.
Okay. So I was talking just a little bit about all the cornerback situations going on. Richard Sherman, obviously, we hope everything's okay in his situation. We hope that everything goes well, and
yep.
He's still free, has an opportunity to help a team from a veteran leadership standpoint. But what do you make about the trade chatter about another cornerback, Xavier Howard, down there in Miami? They're an ascending defense, and he seemed to be a critical part. But what do you make of all these conversations about him moving? He doesn't make anything of it. All right, sorry, folks. We are having some technical difficulties on that aspect. Xavier Howard is a guy that we were expecting to be a heavy part of this secondary in Miami. He's a very talented guy who took his lumps early, but he's proven to be a very solid starting quarterback in the NFL. Fantasy-wise, like we've talked about many a times on the show, in leagues where you have to start a corner, you really do have to rotate, play on matchups. Xavier Howard is probably not a guy that you're starting all too terribly often. But, if he gets traded out of Miami, that's really going to be interesting for a guy like Noah Igbenogany and some of these other guys on this roster, because they have some young corners that Miami's drafted recently. Kraig, I was just talking about Xavier Howard and his situation. What do you make of all that trade chatter down there?
I think whether or not they want to give a guy a pay increase that really just got paid. Byron, they drafted a guy early, like I said, with Noah, and then Holland also has the ability to play some slot corner. I think if they would need to. They have McCourty there who could play safety, could play corner for me. They have a lot of different movable pieces down there. So I think if they could get something that they really like, they'd be looking to trade to him. But I also don't think they're going to trade him just to trade to him, because I think he's still under contract for a few years yet.
Yeah, he's an interesting guy. He came off, I think he had double-digit interceptions last year. He really produced at a high level at the corner position. So I'm surprised. I know they brought in a guy from Dallas and Byron Jones this offseason. So, they added another potential number one corner. But with the way this team looks, I would want all the talented players I can, because they're in a point where, as long as Tua takes the next step, this could be a team to compete in their division. Obviously, Buffalo's kind of the top dog, and everybody thinks Miami's got in the conversation still. But, if I'm Miami, I want talent, and Xavier Howard he's a very high end corner. And looking at his contract, it looks like they really could get out. He doesn't have an insanely high. Oh no, yeah, no, they're probably stuck with him. I mean, quite honestly, and I don't say stuck with him like a bad thing. I mean, 14 million dead cap next year, 13 million the year after, and 12 million the year after that. I mean, those are pretty steep numbers to want to cut bait with a guy unless you're getting a really strong return.
The only other thing I was thinking of before I went and saw how old he was, like maybe they use him because there's been talk about still Watson being traded maybe to Miami, package with Tua and some picks, and I thought, well, maybe they'd put him in there, but he's 28, 29 this season. I don't think that's something Houston's going to be looking for. By the time, in theory, that they probably think they might contend, he'll probably be too old for him really to do a whole lot. So,
yeah, Houston's one of those. As we move into the conversation about training camp and what we're looking for, Houston's one of those teams where I just have no idea what to expect. I know we have some more things we want to talk news and notes wise, but Houston's one of those that we're definitely going to have a conversation about when we get to that part of the show because there's a lot going on there. Next up, NFL Network, Ian Rappaport's reporting that Jets and safety Marcus May will not agree to terms on a contract extension before the tag extension deadline. The Jets did not respond to May's counter and have since pulled their offer, and Rappaport's reporting that the relationship between the two sides is really not in a good place. He also noted that before getting tagged, May received multiple offers with more money in annual salary and guarantees. So with all that being said, what does that change your perspective on Marcus May? I mean, he's kind of a safety too. I don't think he's one of the elites, but he definitely has some startable potential to him. What does this tell you going forward with him? Tells us absolutely nothing. Sorry, guys, we're still having some technical difficulties. So when you look at what the Jets have, obviously Marcus May was a guy that is a prior regime player. Not a Robert Saleh guy, although, May is a very talented player. So he could be a Robert Saleh guy. He's still a starter and potentially next to Ashton Davis. And Marcus May is still young enough. He's only been in the league for like 4 years that May could go somewhere else and be a starter and be a high end, kind of safety 2 type IDP player. So how do you feel about Marcus May? Do you think this is just kind of a bump in the road and they re-sign, or do you think May's gone and he's going to go somewhere else? And do you think he has a chance to take a starting spot somewhere in the future?
He graded out really well. For the Jets, which isn't saying a whole lot from last year for the people on their defense. But I think he could go somewhere and be a nice startable piece, and certainly for fantasy, he could be a relevant asset like he was last year. A lot of his stuff was off a big play, so we'll have to see if that's going to be repeatable for him, especially if he goes to a different situation. But I think it feels to me like it's a situation with the new regime not really being sure that he's one of their guys. They had looked at Keanu Neal. It was between the Cowboys and the Jets. So certainly it feels like they were looking for, a replacement or someone else going forward. Davis was part of the group. I think that the new draft class drafted last year before then they got rid of Gase. So, the front office likes him at least. May not be one of their guys. And they have a lot of cap space, but if it's not one of their guys, why overpay for him? Or, in their eyes, overpay for him. If, hey, we're giving him these fair offers, a bunch of money, he doesn't want it. Let him go. I mean, in theory, you'll get something in free agency for a comp pick. So that's the way it feels to me.
Absolutely. And May was a second-round pick in 2017. He should easily go and have potential to be a starter somewhere. And definitely the compensatory pick is a big part of that conversation. I mean, for instance, for a fantasy relevant player that you guys would know of, Kenny Golladay. I listen to very close people to the Lions. They weren't re-signing him because the goal was, hey, this guy isn't part of the long-term future here in Detroit. Because a multitude of reasons, but he can get us a compensatory pick. He should be a third-round compensatory pick guy. I think Marcus May is a very similar situation. If he goes somewhere and gets a solid deal, and they don't re-sign people to kind of offset that equation, May's going to get them a third-round compensatory pick at the highest, obviously, probably a fourth rounder somewhere in that would be my guess. So, it makes sense.
Yeah, if they don't like him.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. Titans are reporting. Titans.com. Jim Wyatt is reporting that it's unclear whether first-round pick Caleb Farley will return to the field. So, is this 2 years in a row where the Titans have completely bombed a first-round pick?
I don't think so. It seemed like from when I was looking at that, and I did read a little bit more, and maybe that headline was misleading. I think it's a question of when, and yeah, maybe it's not in training camp, but with this year being different again slightly than like a 2019 pre-draft situation, I have to imagine they dug into those medicals as much as they felt like they could or needed to be able to draft him where they did. So I'm guessing they're probably comfortable with waiting around with what they think they have with him to make sure he's fully healthy. It's kind of a weird thing in retrospect. It is 2020, as they say, but do you take him there if you're going to get this Julio thing later to really be contending more so in the future than a right now? Maybe they'd go in a different direction. I don't know. But I do find it interesting if a guy that first round pick.
Absolutely. I mean, it's quite entertaining that as good as Tennessee has been as an organization and making playoff runs and doing all these things, that they can do so with having trouble with these first round picks. We know the tackle situation from last year. Off the top of my head, I can't even think of his name right now. And then Caleb Farley this year with the injuries. But Tennessee's such a strong club, and there's a lot of talent there. So it'll be interesting to see. Especially with the moving on of Adoree Jackson, it'll be interesting to see what they do if Caleb Farley has trouble getting healthy and getting right this year. That could be a really interesting situation to keep an eye on as we move into the training camp season. So next up, the Arizona Cardinals. Jordan Hicks, linebacker Jordan Hicks, looks like he could be released at the end of training camp, depending on how things go. We know that the Cardinals have done a lot at linebacker in the last couple seasons worth of drafting and free agency. But Jordan Hicks was heavily involved in the conversation. You thought he was kind of a big part of their plans, at least for the immediate future, because of his veteran abilities. But a guy like Zaven Collins, they drafted in the first round this year. They took Isaiah Simmons last year, who could play anywhere. I mean, he could be a safety, he could be a linebacker, he can do whatever he wants on the defense. He's just that talented. But now you pair those two in the middle, potentially. If you look at places like Ourlads and some of those that are predicting depth charts, it's not like it's a for sure thing, but kind of the right now, they've got Marcus Golden and Chandler Jones as your edge guys, and then Simmons and Zaven Collins, who's the first rounder from this year, as your middle guys. That leaves Jordan Hicks in a backup role. And depending on how the player feels about that could open him up to being a guy who is released in training camp, and that's really going to be an interesting situation to watch. Kraig, I was talking about the Jordan Hicks situation in Arizona. So with Zaven Collins coming in, do you think they throw a rookie linebacker into the middle of that defense next to Isaiah Simmons and leave Jordan Hicks out to dry, or do you think there's still a place for him in Arizona?
I think from what it sounds like, they're willing to do him a service and sort of let him go if they can't find a trade partner for him. And I don't think that they're going to. I mean, he'll have a place to play somewhere, especially, we see injuries happen or teams aren't happy with the guys that they have. You could go to a place that comes to mind off the top of my head. Be a little bit different, but like the Browns or the Bengals, if they start, really seeing the Browns, I think will compete for that division, but still need something at that linebacker spot. If JOK doesn't come along, Walker just doesn't do what you need. I could see a team like that taking a chance on him, but probably not through a trade. I do think they are going to end up going with Simmons and Collins, barring one of them completely bombing in camp or there being injuries.
I like it. I think so too. I think it's an interesting dynamic. And that's the fun about training camp. All these news and all the notes that start coming out around this time. I mean, everybody's getting cut, everybody's getting released, everybody's moving on. There's trades happening everywhere when that isn't always the case. So as we get into talking about, and the goal for today was to get everybody excited about training camp and to talk about some of the things that we're excited about. So full disclosure, Kraig is a Dallas guy up in Wisconsin. I am a Detroit guy in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Our teams obviously aren't the hometown teams. Our teams are out-of-state teams. So we are going to talk a little bit about the teams that we have our NFL love with, but we're also going to talk about just kind of in general. I want to start with Houston, though, because Houston's got one of the more interesting dynamics this offseason that's come up. All this disarray at the quarterback position, a team in transition. You feel bad for David Culley because he is now the head coach, finally a head coach. He's been, a very well-received mind throughout the game. He was the Baltimore passing game coordinator for a while there and really helped that team move in the right direction. And now he gets to finally be a head coach, and he's in his 60s, but he gets Houston. That could very well be a short-lived stint because this team is just all over the place. What do you make of this team? And then, from the IDP perspective, is there parts of Houston's defense? I lost you again. My idea is that are there parts of this defense that are IDP relevant, IDP hopeful, things like that. So Houston's in a predicament. They don't know necessarily what's going on. Well, they probably know a lot more than we do. Obviously, I do not have a clue what's going on with Deshaun Watson. So Kraig, what about Houston, that defense, the situation at hand? What do you think? What are you looking for? What are you hoping to see through training camp season with this Houston team as a whole?
So I want to apologize. I switched to my phone here so that we have a better connection. Then I went to try to send myself my notes that I had for today, and clearly I can't do both of those on my phone at the same time. So I'm going off the top of my head. But at least we have a better connection now.
Sound beautiful.
I'm interested to see if this new regime believes in Zach Cunningham or not. He's a guy that lost playing time. He had a great fantasy season last year, and we know that fantasy seasons don't always equate to real life NFL positivity for whether it's your current or new staff. But he was a great player. But is this something where the new staff believes in him, where he's going to improve on his play, where they're going to keep him on the field? He's not going to lose that playing time for a team that they're making a really good effort at trying to compete with what they're able to, because I don't think Watson's going to be there for him much this year. They're getting a lot of veterans that are going to be professionals, are going to try hard to try to coach up some of these young guys. But in reality, it's going to be a bottom 5 team in the NFL anyway. And I don't think you're going to see a whole lot over the first half of the season that's going to make them continue to go for it over giving playing time to these young guys. So I could see someone like Cunningham. Trades are becoming more viable in the NFL when it's players for players or players to other teams. You used to not see it a whole lot. I could see Cunningham ending up being traded somewhere if they see other guys on that team, the young guys that they want to give playing time to. The safety position is also another one. They have a lot of moving parts, a lot of different guys they tried there last year. And we know, especially if you don't have a great linebacking core, you can end up having a safety that's really fantasy viable and ends up getting you a lot of points. That's another one I'm keeping an eye on.
Yeah, it's this Houston situation is interesting. And fun fact, this is the first time we've seen Lovie Smith in the NFL since 2015. So even the defensive side of things. I mean, they're Coach Culley's getting the band back together. Lovie Smith, and then he's kind of going to be their pseudo offensive coordinator. Coach Culley is. So this is going to be from top to bottom. Houston's one of those teams that I wish Hard Knocks was following them this year, because I would love to see the dynamic from the top down. We've got the GM comes over from New England, and he brings in, you don't really know what's going on with the entire situation with the coach, the staff, your quarterback. Then they move on from guys. They let J.J. Watt go. They're trying to kind of retool, but still be competitive in a division that isn't top heavy. I mean, we know Tennessee's a strong team. They're a playoff contender. Indianapolis is a team that is on the rise. Is Carson Wentz the guy? Is that going to get him over the hump? You don't know. Then Jacksonville, they're trying to retool, young team, young quarterback, all that stuff. So Houston very much could, could have with a Deshaun Watson that's good to go, everything's set, and he's ready to roll day one. He's arguably the best quarterback in the division, So if you think you have the best quarterback in the division, can you do some things? And that's what it looks like with this roster. It looks like they tried to build pieces hoping that Deshaun's the guy and he's going to be available. From a defensive side, Lovie Smith's defense, if you remember, it's kind of like a Tampa 2 type defense. There was a little bit of variation to it, but it's a defense that can produce a fair amount of interceptions the way that they scheme. Not a heavy sack count from your linebackers, but your defensive line has the opportunity because they typically are rushing 4 more often than not. So like you said, Cunningham, Whitney Merciless, I'll be interested to see what they do with him. If he's, he's a guy that could give you production this year, but he's getting a bit long in the tooth, so it won't be long for him. They brought over Kirksey from Green Bay, who, when healthy, can be productive. They've got a fair amount of linebackers. They got Shaq Lawson they brought over. What do they do with these guys? I think makes it really interesting for this team. Then in the secondary, Justin Reed is a safety that should be on everybody's roster. A talented safety who should produce. He could very well be their interception leader throughout the season. He's a very dynamic playmaker. But then they didn't do much with this team in the draft. They drafted 2 guys.
They didn't have picks. Yeah.
Yeah. Not only did not have any picks, but all the early picks they had, they invested, their top pick, a quarterback and a wide receiver. And that was in the 3rd round.
Yep. Was that Davis Mills and Nico?
Yep. Davis Mills and Nico Collins. Go blue. So it was almost like they were trying to prepare just in case Watson wasn't available, which feels like even back at the draft, they kind of knew that Watson maybe wasn't going to be available.
Yeah.
Signing Tyrod and some of those things.
When he is available, they know they're going to just trade him. That too. So.
Yeah. And welcome Austin. Austin Reed's got a question in the chat. He says, Neville Hewitt was very productive last year with the Jets. Do you think he's relevant or is he completely fallen into oblivion?
There's injuries. I think he could be. But I think you're kind of seeing what they're trying to do. Again, that whole sort of new coaching staff, new regime, defense sort of changing it up a bit. I think they're going to give Davis a chance to be one of the 3 linebackers. Mosley, I think there's enough money invested that he's definitely going to be. And then there's just a smattering guys. They have Cashman there, who's probably going into camp, one of them, but they have Sherwood. They have Nasiril Dean that they both drafted with later picks. They're sort of converting from safety. So I think there's a lot of things that they want to try and do. And Hewitt probably isn't a guy that's going to get a ton of playing time barring injury this year, I would think.
Well, and actually, didn't Hewitt get moved on didn't he go to the team we're talking about, Houston?
I don't know offhand. I can't look it up. Maybe he did.
I'm looking.
There was a number of linebackers that moved on from the Jets, but.
Yeah, he's not in New York anymore, and it actually looks like I don't even see him on Houston's roster either. I thought he got signed by the Texans. Oh yeah, he did. Yep, he signed with the Texans. So so he's competing with potentially Whitney Merciless. Indeed. Thank you, Austin. You're the man. So if he would have stayed with the Jets and everything would have been copacetic, then. Yes, there would have been potential, but now he's going to Houston, and he's going to have to either beat out Shaq Lawson or Whitney Merciless, depending on where they slide him in. If your rosters are deep enough, I take a chance and stash him because you've seen production, but there's enough other guys. They brought over Jordan Jenkins from the Jets as well, so he's not the only guy trying to compete for playing time. I would be cautious here. And probably because I can't imagine your rosters are deep enough, I would probably just let him sit on the waiver wire or fill his spot with somebody who might have more opportunity. Who knows? There's so many pieces. They have so many linebackers on this team right now. You don't know exactly what you're going to get.
Yeah, to the point, though, if you have him on a team in a deep league, hang on to him.
Yep.
See how it pans out, because you did see when he got playing time when he was healthy in the Jets, he was productive. And it's going to be in a similar – sort of gross is the word that comes to mind. Real life situation probably for the Texans, but we always see guys that get production in the NFL. Someone has to get tackles. More often than not, it's one of your or 2 of your linebackers. one of these things where you can't stop a whole lot of people. Teams start running up the score, start running more. So yeah, I mean, I could definitely see him being productive. That's the way it goes this year for Houston.
Yeah, and just trying to get a feel for it. I'm looking through their contracts for these linebackers, for this team overall, for the linebackers. Because sometimes what they give the guys contract wise kind of can give you an idea of what their what their current contract situation looks like, could give them the ability to see. And he didn't get a lot. When you look at the outside linebackers, they gave Jordan Jenkins 2 years, $6 million. He only got a 1 year deal. So I'm not entirely sure. Yep. Austin, I agree. I would have dropped him for Jordan Brooks because, Seattle put a high draft pick into Jordan Brooks. So you got to think that they're going to try to do something with him. So I think you're absolutely spot on, Austin. Let somebody jump on that one because I just don't think he's going to be able to do it. But to the flip side, if he does get playing time, Houston's defense is going to be on the field often. So there will be production there. But I just don't know if he's one of those starters.
Agreed.
All right, so we're already in Houston. We're already talking Texans. Let's talk about the Dallas Cowboys. So this is your team. This is America's team. It's not my team. It's America's team, though, I've been told. What are you looking at? North and South. What are you looking at going into this season for your Cowboys? What are your hopes? Also, training camp, what are you expecting to see or what are you looking to see out of this team?
So, new defensive coordinator, the 1 year experiment with Mike Nolan did not go as they had planned. The whole season didn't go as they planned for any number of reasons, but they got rid of Nolan. Dan Quinn came in. He's sort of still, they got to the Super Bowl with him, but over in Atlanta, but I think he's still sort of going off of that Seattle Seahawks fame, with that defense. And they had a lot more talent on that defense. Not that this defense isn't talented overall, but you look at it sort of concentrated in that linebacker core where most of their powerhouse names are. They do have some nice pieces at cornerback, but for fantasy relevance this year, mainly I'm looking to see how this linebacking core shakes out. What the sort of split is going to be between Parsons, Van Der Esch, Smith, and Neal, because it seems like they're set on Neal being a linebacker. He only has a 1 year deal, I believe, with Dallas. Probably sort of trying to rehab his value and get a bigger contract next go around. They have a strong safety in Donovan Wilson that played well for them last year, and it's sort of how Neal had been playing before. So I don't think that they're going to do that sort of switch, but it does give them nice potential flexibility. And, if Neal has still safety eligibility, and whether through injury or by design, he's on the field quite a bit as a fourth linebacker, he could have value for you in fantasy still, being able to play a linebacker at the defensive back position. What they do at free safety right now, it's a mess with a bunch of just they drafted someone Muko Amua, something like that, I think. In like
Israel Muko Amua.
And then they have like Reggie Robinson from a couple years ago, and then a couple street guys that like nothing really exciting there. So I'm interested to see how that pans out. And then there may be an article I'm dropping coming out about this, but Randy Gregory, big name from like 7 years ago now, had been in trouble. Hasn't played a ton, but there's a lot of reports out. There's a really good article on The Athletic you can check out. He really seems to be trying to actually turn his life around and not just completely screw up. Kazee is there too, that they had brought over from the Falcons.
Yeah. Neal's backup, which is funny enough.
Yeah. And that's the thing with the safeties. Clearly Quinn knows these guys, and the fact that he brought them both over, I would have to assume he discussed it with them where he has a plan and he knows how he wants to use them. I just want to see how that plays out before I go investing a whole lot. But Kazee probably is close to free 99 in most of your leagues too, whereas Neal, I do think he loses value going to Dallas as a linebacker. But if you're playing the long game and you think he's not going to be there and he's going to be back at safety, or sort of that safety linebacker hybrid that you're seeing more of in the NFL now, if you're looking long game, he isn't bad investment, I don't think, because his price is definitely lower. But going to the defensive line, my point about Randy Gregory is they need someone across from DeMarcus Lawrence. I mean, DeMarcus Lawrence, when it's just him, really teams are able to focus on them and neutralize them. They have a lot of young, interesting pieces on that interior for the defensive line. We just have to see how it pans out because those linebackers, like I said at the start, are really nice, but there's just a lot of question marks to me besides that. And with a really high-powered offense, again, the defense could be on the field more than you think, which leads to points, opportunities, points, and IDP.
Yeah. Well, and it is an interesting defense for sure. You hope that Dak's back and healthy because that makes the team better overall, and it's more enjoyable product to watch. But I really liked Odigizua, Osa Odigizua, the interior guy they drafted this year. But when you look at that defensive end group, outside of Lawrence, you got Bradley and I, who they took last year. They got Chauncey Golston they drafted this year. They've put plenty of draft capital into the defensive line as of recently that somebody's got to step up. There has to be somebody that develops opposite of Lawrence. Like, I can't imagine it being Randy Gregory all these years later, but it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, I think of the guys they have drafted recently, I think Anai was a guy last year I was excited about. So I would like to see him be a guy that would step up, but you just don't know. At the linebacker position, I think, Parsons is going to be on early and often. Him and Jalen Smith really should be their two top linebackers because between those two, they could cover sideline to sideline. Like, you don't have to deploy a third linebacker with as much speed as you have between those two. But then they've got Keanu Neal and Van Der Esch. It almost, when they did the things they did, it almost made me feel like, okay, they're going to limit Van Der Esch's snap count to things that make him – put him in a good place to be successful when he's on the field. Oh, look at that. Our boy off the schneid, Terrell Basham is a name to watch on the Cowboys. Related to Carlos Basham of the Buffalo Bills. He's another guy from the Jets. The Jets jettisoned a lot of guys last year. Basham will be an interesting name to watch at the linebacker group, but with as deep as this linebacking group is, I think it'll be hard. I mean, unless they're going to rotate a lot of guys, but when you look at Dan Quinn's track record, he tends to lean on his top guys and then only really bring them off when they're tired. So,
well, and even someone they drafted like Cox this year, I mean, the early reports about him just at rookie stuff was he was as advertised as a guy that was great in coverage, which, you're going to need more of those guys that are able to sort of go out and cover a tight end, and there's several nice tight ends in that division that they're going to have to deal with a couple times a year. So,
and he thinks they're going to slot him in as a defensive end. That makes it more interesting to me if you put Basham's hand in the dirt competing against Gregory and the young guys who are first and second year guys. I think that would be fun for him. I think he could be successful there because he did that with the Jets, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, he's been around a few places. I think he was even on the Texans.
I think you're right.
Past year. So, it's sort of like what we talked about Houston, sort of at those positions, mainly the defensive line, and then sort of the free safety position. They went out and they just have a whole bunch of different pieces to try out. And that's sort of the fun that we're discussing here a bit tonight is you're going to have to see how this plays out and be able to adjust on the fly if you have waivers during the season, like most dynasty leagues, or if you're going to be drafting and redraft IDP league, be paying attention to some of these things. That way you have an idea and you're not caught holding a big name that, was big a couple of years ago and you and your teammates league mates used to think was still going to hold value, but might not anymore. Like Neal, you could see him go a lot higher than his value ends up being just based on name and situation now.
Absolutely. So that's the Dallas Cowboys. Craig's team. Now we're going to go to my team, who 2021 is going to be an interesting year for the Detroit Lions. Hope springs eternal when you get rid of Matt Patricia. Immediately the fan base got excited, because any games won this year is going to be successful in my mind because Matt Patricia was tanking this organization. He took them from a team that was borderline playoff contender to made them a borderline number one pick contender. It's just in 3 years, he destroyed a roster, put guys in positions to not be successful, was very, and as you listen to guys like Michael Brockers, he had the Jim Rome interview recently, and some of these other guys that have been with the team that have done interviews, it sounds as though when you're not a player's coach and all you do is yell at people all day, just like in the regular business world, if you yell at people all the time, they don't work hard and they don't feel like you're thinking of their best interest and they're not successful. But putting that behind us, it's in the past. We got a new time. The time is now. We got Dan Campbell. We got Aaron Glenn. We've got a host of draft picks on the offensive and the defensive side. Detroit is going to be, if nothing else, Detroit will at least be a fun team to watch this year because I know these guys are going to play hard. These coaches, half of them were former players. The other half of them seem like very strong team type guys. We've seen Dan Quinn be successful in little stints as a head coach with Miami. Obviously, New Orleans, Dan Campbell, yep. In New Orleans, people loved him in New Orleans. I'm just excited to see what happens. He seems as though a very authentic, real guy. And I think he's going to try to get the best out of the players because it seems as though he wants what's best for them. He wants them to be successful. He wants them to be themselves. Remember, in the end, we're all individuals. We all got personalities. These guys just want to be able to have fun and enjoy the game they love and get fat paid doing so. This defense is going to be interesting to watch. The linebacking group is probably going to be tough to watch this year, but the secondary and the defensive line are not – they're a lot better than people I think are giving them credit for. Tracy Walker, early on in his career, was a ascending talent. Jeff Okuda, top 5 pick. Omani Oruwariye was a guy who fell in drafts but could be nice in this defense. They drafted third-round kid Melifonwu. Along the defensive line, Trey Flowers, Michael Brockard, Romeo Quara, who led the team in sacks and was actually one of the higher sack leaders in the league last year. Then they drafted Levi Onwuzurike, Aleem McNeil. They got Austin Bryant, Deshaun Hand. This Julian Okwara, this defensive line group is not shabby. I know it's not produced much, so it hasn't passed the Craig Reith sniff test because there's not been a lot of production. I'm really interested to see what happens with Detroit's defense. What do you think about Detroit's defense?
There's going to be usable pieces, and someone even in that linebacking core, which for the most part you're not going to have to pay anything to get one of those guys. Whether it's Tavai in the middle or someone is going to be out there for the most part and going to be fantasy relevant just because they're going to have opportunity and they're going to get that production because they're on the field and someone has to make the tackle. Now, whether they last the whole season or not, there's any number of situations where it's one of those, a guy lasts for 3 games, you got to sub him out because he's been benched or something. Anytime a team isn't great, you're going to run into those possible situations. Walker is still going to be a starting fantasy player. Okwara, assuming he isn't sort of a one-hit wonder, and I don't think he is sort of in that mold of like a Dante Fowler where, he had one great season and fell to crap.
Right.
Flowers has been usable in the past too. It's more been a matter for him of, is he going to stay on the field and going to be playing enough where he's not being rotated out? Let's see if the new coaching staff is doing that. I'm just concerned for these guys because if they make a bad play, is he going to be biting their kneecaps personally? Or are they just going to be biting each other's? That could be causing a lot of injuries for you.
Yeah, no, I think they'll be good there. This team, it looks like, at least in what I've watched in spring ball, these guys seem a lot looser. They don't seem like they're kind of being beat up by the staff. They have enough guys. The concern from an IDP side of things, they have enough guys that they could rotate in on this defensive line that I don't know that there's a guy that outside of like a Michael Brockers, who's a veteran leader. I don't know if there's a guy that stays on the field for every defensive line snap throughout the season. I really do think they're going to rotate guys in and out, but Onwuzurike is a guy that I think could play the Aaron Donald role. I'm not saying he's Aaron Donald, could play that role where he's attacking in that 3 technique type role and be successful as the season goes on. So he's a guy that I would consider I would have taken him in a draft anyway because he was such a high pick and I know they want to use him. But he's got enough talent and ability that I'm jumping all over him in fantasy because I want to see what happens with him long term. Austin, you're the man. I love the show, guys. I may have turned in late, but want to touch on some couple teams' players. Thoughts on the Packers, Devondre Campbell, and Chris Barnes. We'll start there. He's also got a follow-up question. Seeing as you're up there in the green, cheesy Wisconsin, what do you make of some of these guys? Are you excited about them? Do they have IDP relevance in your mind?
So Campbell, I think from what I've heard, and we'll see how it plays out, but just based on sort of where he is in his career, I think he's going to be a super utility player sort of for the Packers, where he could go inside if he needed, but he can also sort of be a backup to both of the Smiths, where if one of them goes down or they need someone else, he has that ability to rush the passer. I don't see Campbell probably as being a starter this year. I think there's enough guys in the middle, a lot of young guys, a lot of unproven guys that they've tried. The name to watch for me in the middle, and I wrote about him, you can see on rotoheat.com, Kamal Martin, I think, is the guy. They were really high on him for a limited time, sort of in the preseason before he got hurt last year. When he played, he was, I think, one of the top 2 highest rated linebackers that had, X number of snaps, whatever the minimum was for grading, and was the highest, I believe, Packer linebacker graded out for when he did play. He's super athletic. He's got speed. He just needs to play under control more, rein himself in. But it still sounds like the coaching staff is really high on him. So clearly, they're going to need 2 of them. But Martin is the sort of the one guy that I'm looking at and keeping an eye on the most. Barnes probably, and I'm going off the top of my head here, of the guys that they used last year, Kirksey's gone, of course. Barnes looked better than Ty Summers, who I think had been a 2020 6th-round pick. And I know there's someone else. Oren Burks is the other guy. He had been on a 3rd-round pick in 18 or 17 or something, which he hasn't been able to stay healthy and really hasn't shown a ton. So I think they're hoping to sort of move on from him. But Martin, to me, is the guy that I'm looking at the most in the middle there for the Packers.
Well, and I was just trying to get a feel for where this team was at last year when it comes to snap counts, stats, things like that. And it
was a mess.
For me, it's a wait and see. If you want to plant your flag on a guy, the middle linebackers are the way to go, because you'd like to think that those are your guys that are going to see the most playing time. But, it almost seems like Zadarius Smith is kind of their attacking edge guy. They're hoping Rashawn Gary can take the next step. For me, I'm looking elsewhere if I want IDP production. I'm going to look elsewhere right now, because I just don't know exactly what to make of these guys. I'm just concerned about any of them. Oren Burks was a guy I thought had all the athletic ability in the world. If they could develop some of the other parts of his game, he could have been an interesting prospect. But Chris Barnes and Kamal Martin are slated to be their starters right now. So if you're looking for inside backer help and your roster is in need of some pieces and you want to take a shot, Austin, I would jump on either one, Martin or Barnes. But I would temper your expectations and look elsewhere if you're looking for immediate impact that you can consistently start, because you don't want to say, I'm going to start this guy on a weekly basis and he does nothing for you, and then it really just makes you feel crappy. All right, before we get to your next one, Austin, since we're in Green Bay, Skip wants to know, how's Love doing so far in Green Bay? No, it's all right. Skip, don't be alarmed. We will answer any fantasy-related questions you got. It is an IDP show, but here at rotoheat.com, we do way more than just IDP. So don't worry. You ask any question you got. And up there in Wisconsin, what are people saying about Love? How are the fan base feeling about him, and what are you seeing?
The whole situation is a mess, and it's going to be a mess even if Rodgers comes back and plays this year. Ultimately, even if he starts every game for him, the drama, the tension, all of it. They say, he's a professional on the field, this and that. Everyone knows what's going on with him. Teammates are going to have an opinion one way or the other. It doesn't sound like he was the most receptive to sort of helping out Love last year, which surprises me in some ways, given what he went through with Brett Favre when he was drafted. But you hear about Aaron Rodgers, he's a quirky guy. Maybe this is his way of getting back at the Packers or something with everything that's been going on. You hear a lot of really good stuff like one day or a couple days in a row about Love, and then you hear a bad day. And, you're going to run into that with most of these quarterbacks. And he's going to be stepping into a lot of pressure. So even if he isn't lights out, is he serviceable? Is he going to be enough of a leader? Is he going to be showing progress where, they think he can be their quarterback of the future? They clearly thought that at one point in time. Then you heard in the offseason, they'd soured on him. They were looking to trade him. There were rumors around draft time about, is he going to get traded to the Patriots? And that, someone wrote something down on a napkin that someone took a photo of and put on Twitter. You see all this stuff, but the fact of the matter is I still think they believe in him long term. I think ideally they would love to get a huge package for Rodgers and ship him out to a team. I don't think that's going to happen. It could. Carson Palmer, I think, got traded during or around training camp, July or August, when he went to the Raiders. Might have been later. No, not the Raiders. Was it
Yeah, it was the Raiders. Yeah, it was the Raiders. But wasn't it like October or something? Wasn't he retired?
Maybe it was even later than
Yeah.
that. Maybe it was in season. But the point is, these things could happen, where Rodgers leaves, especially if he's holding out, but then going to report. I am sort of hands off on a lot of Packers this year just because I don't know what's going to happen. So for redraft, I'm tempering and probably lowering them down my board a little bit. Dynasty, yeah, it could have a worse effect if you're going, all right, Love sucks. That's obvious right away, but then they don't. What are they turning to? Blake Bortles? Part of me would love to see Blake Bortles step in and just go awesome for the Packers offense. Just the part of me that likes chaos would enjoy that. See Blake Bortles resurrect his career as Rodgers' replacement. Like, what a storyline! I know, Brad, you're not hoping that happens. I'm hoping you're getting Blake Bortles in the past 3 years or something. But
as a guy in the NFC North, I want to see Green Bay go down in flames. All right. And Jordan Love, so the reason they drafted him in the first round is he's got a lot of tools, big arm, mobility. The issue was he just needed time to develop. So you put him in this year, this team is going to focus on setting up the run first and foremost. Aaron Jones, we knew he was elite already, but he would be more of a focal point to set up the pass. I mean, they're not going to put Love in a situation where he's just going to get hammered and have to do, 30 to 40 passes in a game like Rodgers has at times. I mean, they're not going to make him unsuccessful and waste that draft pick. So even if he does get moved, even if Rodgers gets moved, Love is going to be a guy that, you're going to see hand off a whole lot more than pass until he gets comfortable because he's only in year 2. It's going to take some time. Like, I would temper expectations if I was a Green Bay or if I was just in fantasy period looking for a quarterback. He's a guy you'd roster, obviously, but I'm not leaning on him as much more than on a QB2.
I took him at the end of, my second to last pick, third to last pick in the Scott Fish Bowl this year with the hope that, hey, late quarterback, you never know. So
I took a kicker and I took Todd Gurley.
I think I took 4 kickers. It was 3 or 4 kickers. So
that's awesome.
Make sure you make your fantasy teams fun and something you want to root for.
Make Scott Fish fantasy fun. All right, so Skip, hopefully that helps. And if you guys have questions, offense, defensive, Debbie, whatever you want to ask, we will answer them. Austin, the other part of your question, also want to hear your thoughts on the Chiefs, Willie Gay and Nick Bolton. If you haven't got to them, don't worry. I'm here listening and waiting. And you should own both of them because I love both of them. Nick Bolton and Willie Gay are 2 different types of linebackers, but they can be very fantasy relevant. Mr. Reith, what do you think about these 2?
Yeah, it's really hard to say with some of these guys, and even probably most of them from last year that didn't get a lot of immediate playing time, that needed sort of more growth. And Willie Gay was really one of them that, he had a disservice done to him by not having that full training camp off season to go through. And you saw it, even someone like Simmons that was drafted a lot higher, just didn't have a lot of time there in Arizona. So Gay, there's going to be a really big season, just the off season portion of the season to see, all right, have you put in the time and the effort to learn assignments where you're going more? Are you playing more under control? Because he had flashes last year in games where you saw why they took him. I think it was in the second round. The guy is a crazy athlete that just needed to focus more on that mental aspect, where Bolton is, I think, just athletically probably in a lower tier if you want to go that way, but he's heady. He gets to the ball. He tackles. He's more of an old school thumper that probably isn't going to make as much of a impact on passing downs. But, it's sort of like what the Cardinals did too, which is why I make that comparison where Simmons and Collins are just 2 completely different guys that they're putting next to each other. But I sort of like it where, hey, we got both of these things with our guys in the middle. They can do it. And I'm sort of seeing that something similar, they're both not going to be in the middle with the Chiefs, but it's 2 long-term potential pieces that are very different that I think can complement each other. So if they're both starting, I think you're going to see tackle heavy leagues, probably Bolton matter more. And then if you're looking potentially at a big play or a guy that might be on the field more in those passing downs, is a guy like Willie Gay.
They're just awesome. I'm a big fan of both these guys. They both got a mean streak. They both are good fundamental tacklers, so we're not going to see a bunch of shed tackles and things like that. They both have the ability, so they both have the ability to start this year. I think they both are smart enough and could step in and do it. The question is, does Steve Spagnuolo believe it? They've got Anthony Hitchens there, and he's a veteran leader that is slated to start right now. Training camp will be really interesting to keep an eye on this battle to see if Hitchens can hold off Bolton. The perceived idea right now is that it's Hitchens and Gay that are kind of the starting backers, but if Hitchens loses a step and Bolton can quickly pick up this defense, it absolutely could have both these guys on the field. And if they are, this is a much more exciting defense to watch in my mind, because Gay is explosive and a big hitter. Bolton is a short tackler and a big hitter. I mean, these guys are thumpers in the middle, and it really makes it interesting to see if they can produce fumbles and all sorts of fun, really interesting IDP-related fantasy fun. So I hope, Austin, for our sake and yours, that both these guys do get on the field, but we'll see.
When the Super Bowl showed last year, I mean, they need more in that linebacking core. I mean, Hitchens showed in that Super Bowl. Yeah, he's a veteran leader. He's a steady presence, but he's not going to make big plays for you. He's not going to be the flashy guy. He's just sort of, at this point in his career, the guy that'll get you, tackles and be just enough to be fantasy relevant, but knowing that you really want to be starting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So with that being said, folks, it is over. Show is over. IDP fantasy questions come up all the time. You can find us. Our Twitter handles are here. You can DM us. rotoheat.com is where all of our fantasy content's at. We've got rankings. We've got individual player profiles in many, many ways and many, many categories. If you're a patron, we've got some Patreon-only specific content we drop on the regular. I've been doing divisional breakdowns to talk about the different divisions and what's fantasy relevant, what isn't fantasy relevant based on ADP. Redraft season is coming. We are here to help you. Austin, we love you, buddy, and we appreciate you hanging out with us tonight. The fun doesn't stop here, though. As we get to the season, you guys know it. If you've been with us for a while, we start streaming on the nightly. Once we get to the season, Monday is IDP. Tuesday, we've got our regular Dynasty show. Wednesday, we've got redraft. Thursday, we typically don't have a show during the season because of Thursday Night Football. But then Friday, we've got DFS live stream. So season's coming. We've got a ton of stuff on the docket. Make sure you like and subscribe here on YouTube so you know when we're going live. And then also make sure you join Patreon. You can help show some love and some other ways to help us know that you enjoy this content, and you can get some special stuff. We are working on only content for those folks. So that's it, man. We're here. Training camp is coming. It's open. It's coming. 2 days, Cowboys, Steelers arrive. The rest of the weekend, we've got other teams arriving. NFL Network and all that's going to be doing some hardcore showing all weekend long, and plenty of stuff coming. And then we get preseason. So I don't know about you, Kraig. I'm pumped. I know you've got lots to be pumped about over the next few weeks. But thanks for hanging out with me, brother. And any final thoughts?
Go Bucks. Bucks in 6. I
like it. I hope so for Giannis' sake. He's working hard carrying that team. So go Bucks. And, if you're a Phoenix fan, go for your team too. My team's been out of the playoffs for a while, so I don't care. I just enjoy watching the game.
If the Phoenix wins, I'm not going to be overly sad. Seeing a team get the first title would be exciting. And, either way, yeah, I want the Bucks to win. I'm a Bucks fan, but isn't that like if they lost to the Lakers, I'd be like, oh, great, another Lakers title. I'd have to hear about it from stupid Laker fans. Phoenix is deserving too. If they win one, good for them. So
that's it. So enjoy the rest of the finals. Don't forget, we'll talk to you guys tomorrow night. Detroit Beastie Chris Robin is going to be joining us. We're going to be doing some mock draft fun and enjoyment. So come back here tomorrow night, 9:30, and we'll talk to you again soon. We love you guys. See ya.
Also, right there, playlist. Hit it. Watch the videos. Do it. You want to.